Yeah.
With this initiative, does it affect any pay scales or potential raises for the employees for Kitsap Transit?
I'd say it's mostly capital. And most of most of our folks, not all, but most of our folks are represented by the labor agreement. So the labor agreements, for the most part, although we're right now negotiating with the largest union, our operators, the others, the raises are already set in the contract, so we're contractually obligated. But no, that's why I say we're moving forward just kind of as normal. We're not in a panic. We're not, oh my gosh, we got to start shutting down service and we got to increase fares and all that sort of stuff. And we've got time to look at this and figure out how we're going to deal with it, if at all. And like I said, if the economy comes in, continues to be strong like it has been, we might be able just to absorb this under the normal growth. When we budget pretty conservatively, and that's what has allowed us to put these funds away for the recession fund, because we budgeted real conservative, but the revenue came in better than what we had planned for. So instead of just taking it and let's go quick spend it, now's a great time. Let's put it away and we'll use it as a rainy day fund. So that's how we've got to where we are now with these recession funds.
Are there any plans to potentially maybe file a lawsuit to kind of get rid of the initiative?
There already are lawsuits filed.
Mm-hmm.
We're not planning people.
Okay, so there's this King County and
well, there's a lot of folks that have joined. I don't know if I want to say joined in, but contribute towards that lawsuit. Not only the city of Seattle and King County, but the Association of Washington Cities, the Association of Washington Transits, for which I just got elected as the president of it, so I'm familiar with that. So there are other groups that are just saying, we agree and we're going to help fund I won't say the defense fund, but the legal fund to challenge that. Typically, what I do is when I hold these meetings is I will pick a subject to talk about. It's more just to get the juices flowing. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. Kitsap Transit. Share whatever or learn from your issues that you might have. But started with, and it was primarily, I think, your classic example of what's going to happen with this initiative and how is that going to affect me. And the short story is that it's not going to affect you right now. The impact of the initiative basically eliminates about $3.5 million a year on average that we receive from the state on different accounts that they provide to us. The good news is that historically we only use these grants for capital acquisitions. We don't schedule and operate service based on that revenue because you never know what's going to happen to that revenue, especially with federal dollars that we receive, those are pretty much used primarily for capital acquisitions. So in the event of something like this, what we do is, our initial reaction is to scale back our capital program, the buying of the widgets and whatever's, to the extent we can. Now that's basically where we're at with this particular initiative. Is we went through and scaled back our capital budget to pretty much what we feel we absolutely have to have. We were planning to replace some computer servers next year. We're not going to do that. We were planning on, we needed to replace one of our pickups that our facilities folks use, and we're not going to be able to do that. So those are the types of things that we just went through and said, okay, take these out of the budget because we're not going to be able to support that. But we kept the things that we absolutely have to have. We've got to buy buses. Without buses, we don't have a job. So, now, unfortunately, a lot of things that we took out are also funded by local dollars, and we had to keep some of our local dollars into the capital plan to be able to buy buses and that sort of stuff. So it doesn't go without impact to the operation, but it's not to the level that we believe that we're jeopardizing in the short-term service or fares or anything of that nature. So the sky isn't falling. We don't have to have our hair on fire and run around in circles. I think we're going to be fine for next year. Now, as we look forward, it will have an impact on us if all of our assumptions on sales tax and things of that nature are correct into the future. We're going to have to deal with it, but we've got time. We can figure out more in a kind of an organized and collaborative method as to what can we do to respond to this challenge that we have. You know, like our home budgets, you either have to reduce expenses or raise your income. That's basically same with the transit system. You've got the revenue side and you've got the expense side. So what we're doing is we're kind of going through, and especially as it relates to the service. The first thing I will say, well, two things I will say in regards to service. The first thing is that our passenger ferry program that we're operating, zero impact this initiative has on that program. So it's going to continue going as planned. We're planning on starting a third route next year out of Southport into downtown Seattle. And still, we're moving forward with that. We're going to be hiring extra people to support that program next year. So things are going as planned. The other thing that I would say is that, like our capital program, and we did go through our operating budget and look for any areas that we could trim back on, you probably won't see any more service expansions beyond what we have today. So we're just kind of putting a freeze to adding on additional expenses to what we have already planned for today. So for now, what we have out there is pretty much what's going to be out there. Now there is one exception. I mentioned the ferry program. We're going to start a route out of Southport next year. We did plan and we'll continue to plan to add extra bus service to support that ferry route. So that's still in the cards next year. But what we're doing is we're going through the service. It's the expense side of the ledger. And we're looking for what could we do to service that would have the least impact to the users. So, for example, some of the service that we've been putting on the road recently is extending the hours later in the afternoon or starting up earlier in the morning. We'll take a look at those pieces, and if the extra hour on route X isn't being used, that might be something that we will put on the list as this is a potential savings that we could look at doing. There are other opportunities for us. For example, when we started Kingston Fast Ferry, prior to us starting that, we have buses that run out of Kingston that supports the Bainbridge Island Ferry. Well, when we started our Fast Ferry, we left that bus alone and we put another bus on that runs from the Casino Park and Ride and takes people up to our passenger ferry. We may not be able to do both. That might be an opportunity where, and I'm not sure which one, we'll have to look and see which one is being utilized the most. But it might be that during the hours that we're running our Fast Ferry, we won't run a bus to Bainbridge Island. It's kind of those things. And again, we're just going through looking for things that, we providing alternatives.
The bus you were speaking of, not the one that goes to Bainbridge, but the one that goes to Kingston. Are you referring to the one that comes from the transit center here and then stops at George's Corner?
No, the one that starts down at the Casino Park and Ride at Clearwater and goes north. We run a bus north while at the same time we have a bus coming south out of Kingston, Pennsylvania. So one's going up to our ferry and the other's going down to Washington State ferries. It might be that if, depending upon which one is being utilized the most, the other one might go away and say, I'm sorry, you have an alternative. You can go to this ferry terminal and get to downtown Seattle. So that might be the option. But I only use that as an example. That these are the kinds of things that we will go through and look at so that when we sit down, and we'll be back working with you guys to say, all right, we think we're going to have to trim X number of hours. Here's a list of things that we think we could trim without having major impacts to folks. What do you think? So I guess the real message that I want to convey today is we've got time. Again, the sky isn't falling. And next year's budget, we're working with the board now, and next year's budget doesn't envision any service reductions.
What is your budget year?
It's an annual budget. It goes from January to December.
So when you're saying next year, you're going to 2020.
2020. Yeah. So that's what we're doing in the service. Now, the revenue side of things, is fair. That's basically the only thing that we have. And again, we're sitting down looking at it right now, and we're only looking for options. We're not proposing any changes next year. But what could we do to the fares that would, once again, have the least impact to the users? And one of the things that we identified was in the method for which we calculate our monthly passes. As you can see, our friends around the Puget Sound, they basically take their cash fare and multiply it times 36 rides, and that's how they come up with the cost of their monthly pass. We take our cash fare times 25 rides. Now, we could just simply go up and adopt the same formulas that the rest of our friends around the Puget Sound use. Now, what that would do is it would not change the cash fare. That would remain the same. But it would change the monthly fare. So you can see Pierce Transit, for example, is $2, and their monthly pass is $72, versus ours is $50. Now, the reason that we think that that would have the least amount of impact is that you, as the users, could decide what works best for you. If you ride the system less than 36 times in a month, it would be less expensive for you to just put money in your e-purse and pay every time you got on the bus. If you're going to ride more, or 36 or more, then it's to your advantage to buy the monthly pass even at the higher rate. So the point is that you still have the flexibility of staying at the $2 a ride, but you can make the determination whether you're going to invest in a monthly pass or not. So that's an example, like I say, of something that we could do to the fares that it will have an impact, but it will have the least impact to the current users. And then the other thing, there's a fair number of our folks that use monthly passes that their employers actually buy their monthly pass for them. So, again, to the writer, they probably wouldn't even notice it. So that's just an example. And then, of course, the other thing is if we were to do that to the routes, we would also do that to the fast ferry passes, just to be consistent with throughout the agency. So those are the types of things that we will be exploring and talking with you maybe next year to start looking at coming up with some solutions to the problem that we see a few years out if we continue. Now, the problem that we see a few years out is really based on all the assumptions that we're making now. We're making an assumption that the economy is going to continue to grow at like a 3% increase on an annual basis. We're making assumptions that we could survive with basically a capital budget that only requires about $3 million of local funds to support that particular. So there are assumptions in there. Things like this initiative can come up that changes our assumptions. We're all been talking about we're due for a recession. Never, you don't know when that recession is coming, but you do know that a recession is coming just because that's the way it's been in our history. So things of that nature will have the possibility of changing what we're talking about here today, but based on our assumptions going forward, we've got time to deal with it. The other thing I would share is that you may have read recently where, because our economy has been doing well, we've worked with our board to establish what we call a recession fund, a rainy day fund. We put money away so that if the recession does come, we can kind of status quo it, assuming that the economy goes flat. Unlike the Great Recession we just went through, where it went into the negative category. So really the transit system right now is in the best financial shape that it's been in history. So that helps us take the time to work with everybody and figure out an organized plan method to deal with some of these issues versus, oh my gosh, my hair's on fire, I'm going to change tomorrow. So that's about all I have to share with the initiative. There's a lot of uncertainty with the initiative. The governor's going to be coming out with his budget here in a couple of weeks. I have no idea what it's going to do. The legislature, certainly they're the ones that finally decide the budget. I do know that there's been some recent discussions with the chair, both the chair of the House Transportation Committee, the chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. They're both looking at it from the standpoint that, it's here, we got to deal with it. So let's start making cuts and trimming back. And it is going to have an impact on some of the state operations. State Patrol is going to get hit pretty hard. Washington State Ferries is going to get hit. Obviously, DOT is going to get hit in some of the things that they can do. Don't know what that means. Certainly what we're being told is the funding that's generally in these buckets that they allocate out to transits and cities and that sort of thing. If basically what we're being told is we have a signed agreement and we're actually under construction, your money's okay. If you have a signed agreement and it's not under construction, I probably would slow down and don't plan on it. And if you have money that we said we were allocating to you, but you don't have a signed agreement, forget it, it's not coming. So that's kind of the general guidance that we've been hearing so far out of the Linfield while they're still trying to figure out what's
Do you
happening.
happen to know what's happening with 305 and some of the plans they had there to try to keep that traffic flowing, like the circle and so forth?
I don't. Some of the funding that we've been told to forget is what was brought under the Connecting Washington funds. We have roughly $3 million allocated to the development of the transit center down in Silverdale. That's basically gone. Not sure of the source of funds for 305. I would be nervous. I understand, I talked with Mayor Erickson yesterday, as a matter of fact. Hallsville is looking at a roundabout out just out of town here, a little ways, they're right at the edge of town. And they basically been notified from DOT that stop,
Really?
you know, the funding that we were allocating to the project may not be there. Now, that funding, I think, came from a different bucket than what's been allocated to the 305 corridor, but it's a big unknown. It's kind of a, we'll have to wait and see. I'm thinking that the legislature, my personal opinion, that the legislature is gonna be looking for any place that they can find monies, and reallocating / prioritizing what funds they do have to try to fill some of these holes. But that's up to them, I don't know. So that's part of why we're taking this position that we are. We're gonna continue to move forward. It's not an emergency. It's gonna have an impact, but we have time to figure out how to deal with it.
So what I understand you to say is that status quo for 2020, that you
Mhm.
may have to make some adjustments beyond that.
And when, I can't even tell you when. The economy could be stronger than what we're planning for. If that's the case, it certainly lessens the pressure. If the economy isn't as strong as we think it's gonna be, then that moves the challenge up. But the big thing in my mind is we're gonna have to be talking about this collectively in 2020. And whether we implement whatever we come to an agreement on in 21, or 23, or 20, whatever, we will have the time to collectively come up with, this is the plan, or this is a strategy that we're gonna keep in our back pocket so that if and when it does happen, this is how we're going to approach it. Now, there's another issue. I mentioned you either drop expenses or raise your revenue. Our fares are a chunk of our revenue, but really what supports the transit system is sales tax. The state allows public transits to ask their voters up to a maximum of 0.9%. Kitsap Transit is currently at 0.8%. We have 1/10 that we could go to the voters and say, are you willing to support an additional 1/10? Now, we're not at all prepared for it. I plan to start having some discussions with the board. If the voters were to approve 1/10, it's more than the challenge that we're faced with here. So what I would want to do is working with you folks is to come up with, what are we going to do with the 1/10? For example, I mentioned $3.5 million impact here. The people have been asking for Sunday service. What can we do for Sunday service? The last time we looked at the cost of turning Sunday on, and when I say turning it on, putting back what we had when we turned it off, the same route, same hours, it's about $2 million. 1/10 of 1% in Kitsap County represents right around $5 million. So if the voters were to approve it, 2 million, assuming that Sunday was on the table, 2 million would come right off the top to support the startup of Sunday service. That leaves us 3 million. What are we going to do with? So we could work together to find out. You know, we're always being asked for lots of things. More bus service, more park and ride lots, more shelters, more, you know, there's just lots of things that we would need to work together to come up with. These are priorities. So that what I would prefer that if we were to go to the voters, I would like to go to you with, here's the plan. This is what you're going to get if you approve this. So it's none of this, just trust me. Give me $5 million a year and And we'll figure out how best to spend it. And I want you guys to know what it is you're voting on. And it's not a whole lot different than what we did when we presented the passenger ferry program. We worked with the community, we figured out what they asked for. We put the plan together and said, all right, if you support it, this is what you're gonna get. This are the routes we're gonna do, these are the hours, these are the fares. You guys knew that in advance of you voting on creating that program. And that's what I'd like to do as well. Now, some of our friends, Thurston County, down Olympia, Community Transit up in Snohomish County, they actually had a list of things that was much greater than what was left on the table for theirs. So they went to the legislature and said, can I have the authority, if the voters approve it, to go beyond that 9/10 cap? And the legislature gave them the authority, and they went to their voters, and their voters approved. Intercity down Olympia just last year, I think it was approved, adding 3/10 above where they were at. So now they're at 1.2%. And Snohomish County did the same thing. Their voters approved it. Spokane and our friends over in Chelan Douglas County, Wenatchee, Leavenworth area, they both had a sales tax issue to their voters, and they both passed it. So my point is if we were to deliver or desire something beyond the 5 million, the community wants us to build bus rapid transit routes or some kind of really enhanced type of service. We'll put a price tag to it, and if there's enough interest for that, we can put a plan and a price tag and say, obviously we'd have to go to the legislature to get the authority, but we could say, all right, here's the plan. If you were to approve an additional, whatever, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, this is what we could have. So it really is kind of up to the community to figure out how much more do you want from the transit system. So that's an option that we're going to be chatting with my board to make sure that is this something that we should even start talking with the community about. Again, we get just the meeting a little while ago in Silverdale, I was asked about Sunday time. I get asked about Sunday service fairly frequently. So that might be an opportunity to say, if that's something that the community is really, really interested in, then we can certainly look at it. So that's kind of the thinking and our plan as we move forward. Right now, don't panic about next year. Yeah.
With this initiative, does it affect any pay scales or potential raises for the employees for Kitsap Transit?
I'd say it's mostly capital. And most of our folks, not all, but most of our folks are represented by a labor agreement. So the labor agreements, for the most part, although we're right now negotiating with the largest union, our operators, the others, the raises are already set in the contract, so we're contractually obligated. But no, that's why I say we're moving forward just kind of as normal. We're not in a panic. We're not, oh my gosh, we got to start shutting down service and we got to increase fares and all that sort of stuff. And we've got time to look at this and figure out how we're going to deal with it, if at all. And like I said, if the economy comes in, continues to be strong like it has been, we might be able just to absorb this under the normal growth of, when we budget pretty conservatively. And that's what has allowed us to put these funds away for the recession fund, because we budgeted real conservative, but the revenue came in better than what we had planned for. So instead of just taking it and let's go quick spend it, now's a great time. Let's put it away and we'll use it as a rainy day fund. So that's how we've gotten to where we are now with these concession funds.
Are there any plans to potentially maybe file a lawsuit to kind of get rid of the initiative?
There already are
Yeah.
lawsuits filed.
Mhm.
We're not planning people.
Okay, so there's this King County and, or is
Well,
King County-
there's a lot of folks that have joined, I don't know if I want to say joined in, but contribute towards that lawsuit. Not only the city of Seattle and King County, but the Association of Washington Cities, the Association of Washington Transits, for which I just got elected as the president of it, so I'm familiar with that. So there are other groups that are just saying, we agree and we're going to help fund the I won't say the defense fund, but the legal fund to challenge that.
Mhm.
And, regardless of what position you are on in what I've been told by some attorneys is that the initiative has at least 3 constitutional flaws in it, if not more. But it's got to go through the court system. My understanding of the process is that they've asked for an injunction against the initiative. If the court approves the injunction, essentially what's going to happen is that tax will continue to be collected as normal. It just will go like into an escrow account. It won't get distributed out to those of us that get it. And if the court rules that the initiative is legal and constitutional, then those monies that would have been collected will be refunded back to those who paid it. If the court rules that it is in violation of the Constitution, then the funds will then be opened up and start flowing as they were before. So that's kind of the process, but the assumptions are that this is going to go all the way through the state Supreme Court, so it's going to be a minimum of a year before any court rules on it. So again, it's kind of a wait and see. Any other questions, comments?
Different topic, or are you gonna go on?
Well, I've got another thing, and I was going to talk a little bit about the implementation of the Southport Ferry, but I don't have to. We can talk about whatever you want.
I have 2 separate things. One is, there was a big, I was told, pilot bus that was going around. Was it an electric bus recently? What's the status of that, and how are we on potentially converting away from fossil fuels?
We do have one battery electric bus. We purchased it to basically run through our system. There are a couple things that affect how far you can go on a single charge. Topography is one, temperatures are another. So we really wanted to see for ourselves how well will this bus work on this route versus that route. We do have monies. We've ordered a second bus from a different vendor just so that we can compare the two before. These electric buses are expensive. They're more expensive than a standard diesel bus. So we're going to get in the second bus and test it out. Now we are also, while we're doing that, we have a consultant that's been working with Puget Sound Energy to find out from the infrastructure side, are they prepared to support all this charging activity? Charging a bus is a lot different than charging an electric car. It takes a whole lot of extra periodicals to charge a bus. So we wanted to make sure that Can Puget Power support 25, 30 big bus chargers at our facility here in Paulsville, for example, or our facility in Bremerton and so on. So we're doing that now. We're also looking, there's a couple different ways that you can charge those buses. You can do what they refer to as slow charging. It's like everybody with their electric cars, they go home, they plug it in at night, and when they come out in the morning, it's all charged and away you go. There's also what I refer to as inline charging, where we have chargers out at a transfer center. And the bus, when it comes into the transfer center once an hour, it plugs in and it charges for about 5 minutes while it's sitting there. and then it goes out and runs its route for an hour and comes back and plugs in. So it's kind of a continuous type of charging. Can our transit centers support charging infrastructure? Does Puget have enough power at these locations? Prime example is our transit center down on Bainbridge Island. My understanding is the extension cord that serves Bainbridge Island isn't big enough to serve Bainbridge Island, let alone Washington State Ferries is trying to change some of their boats that operate hybrids where they'll be plugged in on both sides. While at the same time, if we put in chargers down there, can they support it? So that's what we're doing now. We have been converting a lot of our small bus fleet over to propane. In fact, I don't know that we have too many diesel buses left in that small fleet.
Not really.
Yeah, they're mostly all now shifted over to propane. It's not as clean as an electric bus, but they're cleaner than a diesel bus. Unfortunately, we can't get the big bus engines in propane. You can do compressed natural gas, but that's kind of like making a commitment to electric buses. It takes a lot of infrastructure to support that kind of a program.
Do they do hybrid buses where you?
They do.
Because all the stop and goes, isn't that?
Yeah, they make a hybrid bus, but to be perfectly honest with you, it's not worth the investment. You don't get that kind of a savings for the price that you pay. So the industry, although they're still out there and it still sounds good, hey, we're running a hybrid bus, you maybe get 1 mile per gallon better, and you're probably spending at least $150,000 to $200,000 more over a standard diesel bus. Now, there's another technology out there, it's fuel cells, and that's increasing. And we're looking at fuel cells. We've been talking with some of the folks that make them, just to understand how they work. The thing about fuel cells is you have to have hydrogen, and to make hydrogen, you have to have electricity. So once you make it, you also, like CNG, you have on a bus to be able to travel for a length of time. But while the bus is out running around, it's burning hydrogen, and essentially its byproduct is water. So you have water dripping out of the exhaust pipe. That's the byproduct of running fuel cells. It converts it to electricity, and the bus runs on electricity to fuel cell generators. So we're looking, before we go head over heels into a technology, whether it be electric buses or hydrogen buses or whatever, we just need to understand the total impact before we do it. It's kind of a long answer to your question.
Do you calculate the carbon footprint for the transit and then have goals for?
Yeah, we have goals every year that we're working to reduce that. And we've done a number of things. That's why we went to the propane buses. We've done things operationally like reduce the idle time the buses have. If we're going to be at a transfer center more than 10 minutes, shut the bus off, don't let it sit there and idle. We've been doing a lot of things with our facilities. We just converted, not just a couple of years ago, we converted our main maintenance facility down in Bremerton to basically all LED lights. Converted the parking lot and the building and everything else over to LED, which reduced our power consumption by a ton. We also, we're real serious about environmental sustainability, and there's a standard that you can work to. It's under, I forget what ISO stands for, International
Standards Organization.
Yeah, it's a standard that is established that if you achieve that level, that you are doing really, really well in environmental sustainability. And it's quite a feat to get there. And we've achieved what they say, ISO 14001, 2015 standard, I guess it is. And you do it by facilities. Our facility in Bremerton, where all of our maintenance takes place and where a lot of our fuels are and everything, we achieved that standard 4 years ago. We've then taken that standard and we've moved it up here to the to our new facility in Hallsville. We're certified there. And we've just finished getting our ferry operation on the waterfront in Bremerton where we fuel the boats. That facility has just been audited. Have we got a certificate on that yet?
Yes, we did.
Yes. Okay, I know we just got approved. So, and you have to go through, you have to bring in outside auditors to come in and audit your whole operation. And we're one of like 50 transits in the U.S. that have achieved this standard of environmental sustainability. And it deals with recycling and it deals with just reducing our carbon footprint wherever we can. So we take it pretty serious from a variety of different aspects, just because we have a team of people that work in every department within the agency that bring that to the table on whatever it is we're talking about. So we've got our maintenance department has gotten pretty much completely paperless, which for bus mechanics, I thought that would never happen. But it's great to walk out in the shop and see them with the laptop looking at what the job order is or tracking what pieces that go into the bus and that sort of stuff. So we've completely eliminated paper and that. Where this year we're looking at, from the finance standpoint, little things like our pay stubs. Let's just go electronic. Let's get rid of the paper that's generated for the pay stubs. Things that we're doing just on an ongoing basis, examples. And we've got some of our although that went away in this capital budget, darn. We have a car share program for smart commuters, as we refer to them, and we used hybrid cars that are positioned around. And we were going to start replacing those cars with electric cars and taking those hybrids and moving them into another part of our operation. For example, our drivers, the first driver in the morning will take the bus and go out and start running. And then when it's coming to the end of their shift, the relief driver will take a small car out and meet the bus. And they will trade, and it keeps the bus from having to drive back to the main facility. And we were going to move some of the hybrids into the driver relief. But unfortunately, those electric cars were casualties of this initiative. We had to pull them out of the budget. So eventually we'll get there.
A different question, but I don't mean to hog the questioning. The finest, is it going to be okay? Because it's out a lot.
What was the question?
The finest boat.
The ferry boat, the
ferry
finest.
Kingston.
I think I will preface my answer by saying it's a boat. It's a piece of machinery.
My husband
Yes.
says they should have named it something else, as we were begging for.
Well, you know, unfortunately, it's boats. It's not just the finest. We're brand new boats that we have for the Bremerton route. I mean, there's gremlins in the water that crop up, but yeah, I mean, as we find these and we're actively looking, it's not like we're sitting around waiting for it to break.
Right.
We're fixing and repairing and replacing, but it's just, goofy things like the latest thing on the finest. I don't know if you know how water jets work, but basically they're a propeller inside of a housing that pushes water out these outlets in the back of the boat. Hence the jet. Well, the only way that you can go in reverse is that they have these, what they call buckets. They're a curved piece of metal that drops down in front of the nozzle, which diverts the water coming out under the boat, and it creates, the ability to back up. Well, these buckets drop with little things like solenoids. When the captain reverses, the solenoid clicks and these buckets go down, and one of the solenoids went bad. It's about a $150 piece of equipment that it took a while to track it down to find out, is it the controls or is it something as simple as the solenoid, to get it replaced. So we replace it. So then something else crops out. But in anticipation, the controls, we've ordered new sets of controls just to have them on the shelf in case. We have quite an inventory of parts that are just in case. But they're pieces of machinery. They're gonna break.
It
It's a,
hasn't been anything serious, it's just
no,
silly stuff, yeah.
but, you know, even at that, one of the problems we recently had was that dock in Kingston is really exposed to the wakes of the car boats and the weather and the way the boats get tied up, they have these cleats that are welded to the decks of the boats, and then there's cleats on the dock and they tie them up. Well, they got thrown around in a storm we had not too long ago so much that thank goodness that the ropes held, but basically there's on the side railings of the boat, there's a cutout where the line goes through. Well, it kept rocking back and forth so much that that line finally cut right through the metal part of the railings. All stopped. We gotta go get that fixed. That was one of the things that we had to take the boat out. Literally, we had to take it up to Port Townsend to some welders out of the water so they could get that thing re-welded back up. So, it's a boat. One of the things that we have learned, you know, it's a joke, but I think it's true. BOAT is really an acronym. It stands for Bring On Another 1,000. You just get prepared for it. That's why we have 2 boats.
Yeah, well, it's nice to have the backup, but I guess that one is.
Is it big enough?
My understanding is that when it's roughed that all out, if people are turning green.
Well, the other thing is it's not big enough to meet the demand, so we're having to leave people behind because people are gonna have to run up and catch another boat or something. That's why we've got new boats under construction. In fact, can you bring up the Southward? This is the finest. This is the original boat that we had for the Bremerton, the RP1. This is the artist rendition of the new boats that we're building, one for Kingston and one for Southworth. And these are built to be bow motors. They can drive into a car slip at Washington State Ferries and the transfer span can sit down on them. They also, though, have a side loading capability, so when we pull into Kingston or Seattle, you know, we don't have the car loads. But basically, that's what we're building. But going back, well, you can barely see that little hole right there in the side of the hull. That's the line where it goes through that hole right there. There's another one here on this boat, right back there. It's designed to be here and here. Here's another example of what the hole looks like. Well, that's the thing that the line went through there, but the boat went back and forth so bad that the boat just cut right in through the railing part. But there's the new boats.
So 2 new boats, one for Southworth and one for Kingston?
Yeah.
So what happens, how does that work then? That'll be the main boat for Kingston and then Finest will be the second boat?
The
Or Finest
one new boat for Southworth, one new boat for Kingston. The finest will be a spare that will be shared. So unfortunately, because Southworth, the only thing we have down there is a car boat landing. We don't have a passenger ferry dock. If something were to happen to the boat for Southworth, we would steal the bow loader from Kingston and put the finest in place in Kingston. But these are the boats. This is the hull that's being turned over. When they first start building it, they build all these frames upside down and they start welding the panels on them, and at some point they flip it over, and that's what's going on here. And this is the wheelhouse that's being made, that's being set up on top of this when it gets constructed. So they're real. They're just not done yet.
The timing of hitting the dock would be something, because I know Southwood has 3 boats hitting the ferries for the Washington State. What would be the timing for loading and unloading for the foot passenger?
It varies. It varies based on a couple things, but the shortest is 5 minutes. The average is probably 9 minutes. But that is going to be the most challenging route to schedule, because not only do we have to look at when is the dock available in Southworth in between car boats coming and going, but then when that boat gets to Seattle, when is the dock in Seattle that right now is designed for 2 boats and there's 4 boats competing for space. Southworth would be the 5th, so when is that dock open up so we can get in there? So there are sailings, and we haven't really finalized the schedule, we just did a hypothetical to see if it would work. There are sailings that we will go from one end to the other pretty much full throttle, and there are other sailings where, you know, we're at half throttle because no use of going in a hurry because we don't have any place to tie up when we get there. So it's going to be a really interesting looking schedule. But
So if you have a boat breakdown, a Washington State ferry gets tied up, your boat's just pretty much hanging out there.
yeah,
Okay.
And the capacity of this new boat for Kingston is comparable to Finest?
yeah, it's actually, these boats are 250 passenger, and the finest is 350, but we haven't opened the upper deck. The most that we've had right now in the finest is 230. So, you know, it should be, for a while, it should be fun.
Your ridership is as projected? Or-
Yeah, it's actually a little better than we projected. So that's, you know, that's kind of the boats. That really is more like it, because it's an artist rendition, but that's kind of what they're going to look like. And it's been designed specifically for example, these doors opening here. We've got places for bicycles so that, you know, there's quite a few folks that will take bicycles now on and off, so we're planning for that. And again, when we get to Seattle, they're gonna have to get on and off with everybody else off the side door. Any other questions?
Thank you.
So regarding all the changes to the routes currently, the 332, the cancellation of 36, 37, I think. What is it? The rerouting of the 332 doesn't make sense to me. It seems like it's just going to take even longer, and I've noticed this with 217, it'll constantly be late. And it's frustrating, especially with 217. It's all, you know, it seems to be almost always late, especially later on, like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. It's always late. It won't catch up with the 32, so I'll have to wait and turn around. And I'm also worried that going all the way back from, instead of going onto the freeway and then onto Keyport and onto Silverdale Way and then into Brighton Way. Instead of doing that, it goes all the way through Silverdale, around and up Ridgetop, and then it goes over to Silverdale. And there's a lot of stop signs, or stoplights between there and, getting to Ridgetop, both of them. So,
Have you looked at the 301 route?
I have.
Will that work? Because that's
I
gonna be
mean,
more of an express.
It's, I mean, it's the, I mean, you've changed, you changed it to 301 and, you know, when it was just the one, it was working fine, and then the 301 also has these delays because you're going through, McWilliams and all that. And like there's always going to be some delays, and it's frustrating because it's like I don't feel like we plan for all these delays.
Well, we have made some schedule adjustments to 217 that are gonna be implemented, to try to deal with some of that, give it more time. The 301 was designed to be more of an express.
Express, right.
Yeah, so that there's, although it is still traveling through Wheaton Way, for example, its trail is about the shortest that we can make it, and going between Silverdale North, it's trying to be more express, where the 332 was moved. You know, obviously we can't pick anybody up on the freeway,
Right.
so we moved it over onto Silverdale Way and Viking Way as much as possible to provide service there, while we have the 301. It's more of the express. That's why I was wondering if you looked at the 301 as an example. So that's the concept, but
That's constant.
yeah, and we're always striving to make sure that the buses are on time, even if we have to make adjustments to the schedule to accommodate the additional traffic. I mean, we can't magically, obviously.
I'm not expecting that. It just,
Yeah,
it's
no,
just
I,
like, it's just like when you notice a pattern, it's like, why haven't they noticed the pattern?
well, we have, and that's why we're making some of the schedule changes planned for December, is to try to make some of those adjustments. One of the things in 17, for example, really didn't do before was it really didn't make connections with anything in East Bremerton, so that schedule has been adjusted now, so it does. So, yeah, we're tweaking it. That's part of what we're doing in December, is we've recognized some of those issues, and we're trying to make changes to accommodate improvements. So hopefully it'll be more reliable for you. We'll keep working at it.
Well, the changes 332 concerns me too, because most of my work is Bremerton, and it's West Bremerton and East Bremerton, so you can imagine I'm on the 332 quite a bit.
Check the 301. Check out the 301.
Yeah, but I have to take that from the transfer center, and then early mornings, I have really no way of getting there.
Okay.
So would it change, like, I live by the movie theater, with it going through there change? I mean, would I still be able to connect up in Silverdale to the buses I need?
Yeah, the 301 you'll be able to connect with it.
See, the 301 was an option for me when the 333 would stop up North Viking and I could get off and switch buses.
Right.
But it doesn't do that anymore.
The 301, check it out, see if that'll help. Now, getting to the transit center might be a challenge in the morning, but,
Right.
you know.
And it wasn't until y'all, for whatever reason, took
Well, part
stopped
of it,
the 333 from going in there.
yeah. All I can say is I can take a look at it to see, I'll ask the question, but unfortunately, I've gotten too far away from it to know the details of it. I just know the concepts of
Right.
301 was specifically designed to be an express that connects the OC campus through Silverdale to the Bremerton campus of Olympic College, and then on into downtown to the ferry terminal in Bremerton. So it's more the concept of what we're trying to accomplish with this is more speeding up the trunk routes, connecting communities.
And the 212, 217, well, in the mornings they run like clockwork.
Yeah.
If you have to catch them at a certain time, they're a great source of frustration both to your drivers and to your passengers.
Well, like I said, we just made some changes, so we're making changes on the 217, so that should help alleviate some of that, so make it a little better. Okay. Well, thank you all. Thanks for coming out on a Saturday morning. Appreciate it. And sharing your thoughts.